Today, we are going to be talking to Gwyn about kickstarting a plant-based lifestyle. And for some people, they may not even be familiar with that, and other people might know a little bit about it, but there's always room to learn more. And I find that whenever I talk to people on this broadcast, even though I know a lot about it because I've been doing it since 2012, I just seem to always find out more information. So I'm really glad you're here. What we're going to do, though, is what I like to do is we'd like to start off with our game called True or False.
It's time for True or False on Be Green with Amy Live. Answer true or false to Amy's questions in the comments below, and Amy will ask our guest for the expert answer.
Okay, so our first question is, and I'm going to read it to you guys too. True or false? Plant-based diets are very restricted. So everybody, you can type in your answer or just think it in your head. You don't have to type it in. And we're going to ask Gwyn to talk about that. So what do you have to say about that?
It's funny because people always think that it's about things that you can eat, but the variety of plants is pretty amazing. I was just, when you were typing that up, I was thinking about lentils, just one category of one type of bean, and yellow, orange, green, brown, black, different textures, different tastes. So the variety of food is very exciting. And once you get out of the food rut of cooking with animals, then it opens you up to a whole different perspective on plant variety. But one of the things that I like to tell people is don't count grams of protein, count the varieties of plants that you eat every day and try to get at least 25 different plants.
And to some people, that might sound like a lot of plants, because on the average American diet, they probably may have some tomato ketchup and maybe some lettuce or French fries, and that would be their plants. But I do tell people that when you add spices and herbs into your food, that also kind of counts as plants too. So if you put oregano and things like that, that's counts towards your plants sometimes to give you that variety.
That's right. I think the whole concept around microbiome, I think that's being talked a lot more these days, is it's not just what you're eating, it's what's coexisting in your system that's sort of symbiotic with your health. So your microbiome is your health. And the fiber in plant foods is what the microbiome, actually the bacteria in your microbiome actually feed on. So the variety of plants improves your immune system and populates a wider variety of bacteria for health benefits.
Sure. And there are just so many foods that the average American probably does not include in their diet, and fruits and vegetables, sure, but and you talked about the legumes and different things like that as far as having the lentils. I find that really helps a lot with texture. So sometimes people are missing a meaty kind of texture. Maybe it may not be the flavor, it might be the texture. And it seems that lentils are great for if you wanted to have a chili kind of texture. You could cook up some lentils the same way you would make chili, except instead of the meat, you could put in the lentils, and you would, with all the different flavors in there, probably people wouldn't really notice the difference.
And I tend to like lentils the most for cooking at home because I get the dry beans, and the lentils will cook in 30 to 45 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes. So they're very fast, and you can soak them for a very short amount of time and have dinner ready on the stove top without too much trouble.
So people say whole food, plant-based. It's kind of a weird phrase. So what exactly is whole food besides some cute grocery store?
So if you look at the My Plate, that's the Food Nutrition Board out of the Department of Agriculture, they talk about fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and then the category of protein, which in a plant-based diet is beans and legumes. And if you go to the Harvard Medical School in Canada, they actually talk about whole beans and grains instead of just protein, which is a macronutrient. So when the Food Nutrition Board, which makes new recommendations every 5 years, was planning to submit a plant-based diet, the food industry kind of went ballistic, and the dairy industry and egg board and beef board all started badgering them. So they changed the category of legumes to protein and stuck dairy on the table. So if you go to Harvard Medical School now, they have actually replaced milk with or dairy with water as being a preferred drink and taken that off the plate. So we start to see progress. Every wave that they make, I think they're getting closer to what we see as a transformative diet, which is when you take these things out of people's diet, their most chronic illnesses go away fairly quickly.
Yeah, it's just so amazing that there are so many different illnesses that are out there that are food related, and we wouldn't even know it. And the same lifestyle diet that can help with one can help with so many of them. So when you are on a plant-based diet, we talked about the different things that you would probably find, the fruits and the vegetables, the whole grains and the beans and legumes and nuts and seeds and herbs and spices. So people think about it being restrictive. So there are certainly things that you are going to avoid. What would you be avoiding?
Basically anything that's got a mom and dad or a face. Those are the things that we tend to take out. So at GreenFare, we actually do a couple things.
And I just want to remind everybody that GreenFare is a plant-based restaurant that you own and operate. So go ahead.
Yeah, I like to call it a educational cafe, because I started the restaurant with the purpose of providing education to people on how and why to eat this way. And we do a program every month called 21 Day Kickstart that is in alignment with Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, so pcrm.org. And you can actually go to their website and do the program for free, or you can come to GreenFare and do it with our instruction in class and take home meals. So we actually provide meals, 2 meals a day for the duration of the program. We do blood testing before and after. And we watch every month really dramatic outcomes for people. Usually people come in with high cholesterol, high blood pressure, they want weight loss, and type 2 diabetes is very prevalent. And we've shown that usually hypertension you can resolve within a week. And you're a Plant Pure Pod, so Nelson Campbell showed the 10-day blood testing that he did in the Plant Pure Nation film. We do that, and we've shown 20% drop in cholesterol, usually in just 10 days. So it's very dramatic.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And people think of maybe changing up to this lifestyle as being dramatic, but the trade-off is the dramatic change in what they have experienced in their health. So anything with a mother or a face, and some people kind of still get confused with that, because I know that I have told people when they ask me about it, I've explained that, and they say, well, what about shrimp? Because or fish, because sometimes people, when they're presented with it on their plate, it doesn't have a face.
Yeah, true. Even fish, you very rarely do you see fish. Everything's packaged these days. And I think if you had to go to a farm and point at an animal, or go, I remember going with my family on a cruise, and there was a fish on the menu called Dory. And my dad goes, "What's a Dory?" And my brother goes, like from
Nemo.
what was the movie with the fish? Do you remember the name of the movie?
Nemo, Finding Nemo.
Finding Nemo. He's like, Dory. Dory was Nemo's friend. And my dad had a funny look on his face. It's like, okay. But if you had a name on the fish that you were getting ready to order, then it puts it in a different perspective, and it's so cultural dependent. I went on a trip with Joel Furman in Sardinia, and Sardinia, they eat horse. It's on the menu. You go to a restaurant, and it's like people here would just be look at that in disgust. And
Yes.
the same in the Asia. I think the things they eat in Asia. But if we look at the places, the types of animals that we eat, and the mammals like pigs that are smarter than dogs, and I have dogs, and I can no more imagine eating a pig than I could imagine eating my dog. So it's
Right,
just a
exactly.
cultural thing. And when you get over that, you kind of free yourself to whether it's for your health, your own health, or for the. I think everybody that's in the environmental movement knows the impact of our dietary choices on climate change. So if you care about the environment, you're starting to consider making dietary changes as well.
Right. So, and especially the factory farmed animals too. That's we could have a whole talk just about that. But we're talking about the things, anything with a mother or face, and but that would include dairy products, and dairy is milk and cheese because they come from an animal. So I think it's just a lot of people aren't informed because they just, like you said, it comes in a package or a container in the grocery store, and they don't really think about that it actually came from something that was living and breathing. But there are also other things on this plant-based diet that, because you are involved in these kickstarts where you help people to adopt this lifestyle and you can see these different disease reversing, there are some other things that you suggest that they avoid in order to do better as far as their health and the blood work. So, I mean, as far as maybe, well, you have something in your restaurant, and you're not just plant-based, but you're SOS free. So why don't you talk about that? Because that would be telling us about things that we might not want to include.
So SOS is the food industry's trio of salt, oil, and sugar, the things they use to get people addicted to food and consume more calories. Most restaurants use salt, oil, and sugar extensively to reawaken food that's been frozen and probably delivered from a truck to their back door that goes in their freezer. And if you ever wonder why they have such expansive menus, it's because they're pulling frozen food out of the back and cooking it in a pan with oil and adding salt to try and reawaken the flavor. So, just to continue the last part of the discussion, any kind of animal protein is going to provide saturated fat. And I think the government actually banned trans fatty acids from people's food. The largest way that they get saturated fats, which have been shown to promote heart disease and diabetes and hypertension, are from animal products. And at the same time, the tropical oils, which tend to be just as bad from an inflammatory perspective. Oils that are, you have these essential fatty acids. So omega 3s and omega 6s are essential fatty acids that we need in our diet. And when you get them in the right amounts, it's great because you have a body in balance. But when you get a lot of oil, the omega 6, that's going to create inflammation. So we see people that come in with all kinds of joint pain that really can resolve in a very short amount of time when you take take the oils out. So that's sort of something that people have, maybe when you get on plant-based, and then the next thing is kind of like this oil-free concept. And sort of unfortunately, a lot of the vegan products these days do include a lot of oils in there. They replace the animal products with oils. So, we see a lot of vegans with the same chronic illnesses, that people are on the carnivore diet. So it's providing that education that if you're eating for health, you're eating sort of back what you were talking about initially, which is whole foods, things that you can see in their whole context that are minimally processed.
Right, because you can distinguish between vegan and whole food plant-based, and I guess that's why they came up with that, because there is a difference. And when we see people that are eating vegan, and that would be including foods that have a lot of oil in them and maybe a lot of ingredients that are deleterious to your health, and and then we would see a vegan that maybe didn't look healthy, and we would think that maybe that this lifestyle wasn't health promoting, but this isn't not about being a vegan.
Right. I tend to like to look at it from most people that I've met were not born vegan. It's people are on that journey. And so it's trying to meet people where they are on the journey and help them along, without judgment. And I always view it as planting seeds that not everybody's ready all the time to make a change. But if you have a discussion with people and then they hear it someplace else, they watch a film like the Game Changers film, these things, or read a book. Forks Over Knives basically did that for me. It dispelled the myth that you have to eat, animal products to get the protein and calcium that you need.
Right. And it's so much. Let's just talk about that, because that is one of the myths about protein that people worry about. So people think that you do need animal products to get protein. So where would they get their protein?
So we were talking about that a bit before. I think there are 3 macronutrients. I think that people are very familiar with. They may not have heard them called that, but fat, protein, and carbohydrates. And people, there's been these concentrations on low carbohydrate diets ever since Atkins came out in South Beach. It seems like every few years there's a new book that sort of vilifies different things and promotes these, high protein, high fat diets, one or the other. And unfortunately, what can result is people can lose weight short term, and primarily what they're losing is water weight. And then when they go off these crazy restricted diets that cause everything from brain harm to high cholesterol to constipation, bad breath, high blood pressure, all of these things, that the diets have been shown to be the highest mortality diet of any diet that you can eat. They usually quickly regain that weight plus more because they're eating the same way they did before. So eating the high carbohydrate, complex carbohydrate diet, usually always say if you want to lose weight, then drink more water and eat more fiber, count the variety of plants and count the grams of fiber, and you'll be fine.
Right. That's a good way of talking about it, because people are used to counting calories, and
Right.
you're saying count. If you want to count something, count the grams of
Fiber,
fiber.
right.
Right. Which those of us who have adopted this lifestyle and have been on it for a while, we're not really counting much of anything, except for making sure that we have a variety of different things in our diet. So some people are worrying about adopting lifestyle because of certain barriers. And I'm going to put up another true or false. And this one is true or false: eating a whole food plant-based diet is expensive. So what do you say about that?
Well,
And you
the
guys can type
diet
in
that
your
you're
answer.
talking about there is known as a peasant's diet. It's usually in medieval times, it was the king that had gout and hypertension and heart disease, and the peasants were thin and healthy. And it was the beans and rice diet that usually is very inexpensive. Lentils, I think, for protein are the least expensive legume that you can eat, and rice has been a staple for years because of its inexpensive quality. And then you're just adding fruits and vegetables as the micronutrients that they provide to add sort of balance to that.
Very good. Okay, we kind of talked a little bit about these nutrients and so forth, but let's put this other one up and see if you guys want to type in your answer. True or false: you need dairy, milk, cheese, yogurt in order to get enough calcium. So there again, what specifically, if somebody was worried, because people worried about osteoporosis and they're worried about children that are growing. So should they need to be concerned about adding things in as far as that goes?
So there's a couple things. One is I grew up with my mother reading the Dr. Spock, the baby book. And a lot of people don't really remember, but Dr. Spock was actually a plant-based doctor and promoting plant-based nutrition. I had the opportunity to meet his wife a couple of years ago. He was in his later years. He was very engaged in policy of food for children. And Dr. Furman has sort of stepped up in his place these days, I think, with he's got a great book called Disease Proof Your Kids, and it's about plant-based nutrition for children. So with calcium, and you mentioned osteoporosis and osteopenia, it's sort of ironic that, 50% of the population is lactose intolerant. No adult really needs to drink milk. That's something that's for young animals or babies for a period of time when they're in a high growth period of time. And dairy is basically baby cow growth hormone. It takes a 40-pound calf to a 400-pound cow as quickly as possible. And unfortunately, the same things that cause that baby cow to grow also promote cancer, as Dr. T. Colin Campbell talks about in his book, The China Study. The challenge, I think, is when you look at countries that have low dairy consumption, have an absence of osteoporosis and osteopenia, primarily in Asia, where you see lactose intolerance as being very high. And they have a very high soy consumption. So there's been a lot of controversy thrown around soy and the phytoestrogens that soy contain, the plant estrogens that have actually been shown to be blockers of spare estrogen, and they can be very protective for things like breast cancer. I'll mention, soybeans and quinoa have all of the essential amino acids that are necessary in the human diet. So they tend to be very favored, for consumption in countries, especially where they're on tighter budgets.
Yeah, and you can get very full with those beans and lentils. I tell you, and what I like about them is that your body doesn't absorb all the calories that are in them. So you can be eating and feel very full, and it will help you to lose weight, which is very nice for people that are looking to do that. So let's talk a little bit about supplements, because I think that's another thing that people are concerned. They want to know, is this really safe? Because they think they've been taught for so many years that it's so important to get these animal products because of the nutrients or what have you. So to people who are avoiding these animal products, what do you want to talk about that would be important for them to think about if they were going to be doing this as a life-changing lifestyle?
So usually when people are making a change in diet, there's always a lot of fear, I think, around that. And that's in the programs that we offer. We try to make people comfortable by showing them data and providing a food that's a variety of food that they can experience over a period of a few weeks. And so they become more comfortable with it. And it's when you start watching your skin change, you get a rosy glow, your sleep is better, your energy is better, and you kind of relieve people from the concern of having to be on count calories or portion control. We do talk about intermittent fasting now, so it's not snacking through the whole day. It's really eating a few solid meals and kind of restricting the time window that you're eating. So you're not eating from when you get up to when you go to bed, but restricting that eating. And you just watch people's sleep improves and energy skyrockets. And that's really what gives people the knowledge that they're on the right path. The supplement industry is unregulated, and I think its estimates are anywhere from $50 to $60 billion a year. So it's a huge industry. And, their fear, uncertainty, and doubt is if you're getting it from food, then maybe more is better. And sort of unfortunately, your body recognizes things as food or not. If you get it in the form of something that was created in a laboratory versus something that was created in nature, it's probably going to be in amounts that your body won't recognize. And unless your doctor has prescribed it, then you probably don't you're probably just wasting your money and not only not benefiting you, but creating harm with your liver and kidneys that have to process the excess nutrients out of your system. So usually, with the exception of B12, and B12 should probably be taken by everybody these days because of the prevalence of chlorinated water and the chemicals in our food system, that most of the B12 has been, the bacteria that produces B12 has been taken out. Animals that are in the food chain these days are routinely given B12. So that's the only nutrient that is essential for human health that we actually make in very small amounts in our bodies. But that's the only supplement that we recommend that people take.
Right. I'm glad that you also talked about that it's not just for people who are adopting this lifestyle, because it's something that it actually comes from the earth, from the dirt. And it used to be the farm animals would be eating grass and they would be eating up all that, and then we would get it from their flesh. But now the farm animals are not necessarily eating, because you don't see them. You think you see them, but you don't see them. And then what they're eating is not things that they're ripping up from the ground. So everybody should probably be tested at least, and talk to their doctor about supplementing. So I'm glad that you talked about that. I'm also glad that you kind of touched upon the intermittent fasting. For some people who have not adopted this lifestyle, and I know if it was me and I had not yet heard about this lifestyle, and you talked about only eating a few times a day, it would send me into a panic, my before 2012 self. And that's because for me, I had to eat maybe every 2 or 3 hours, or else I would feel like I was falling apart. I would get shaky. I didn't know that I was detoxing every time that was happening. I didn't know that I was addicted to a lot of the foods that I was eating, but that was what was happening. But when you want to talk about how when you eat this way, that you don't necessarily feel the need to be eating all the time.
Yeah, so there've been, I think there was a study in the 90s that came out that got a lot of visibility. It was about food combining and having to eat beans and greens at the same meal to get complete proteins. And unfortunately, the author recanted that probably 6 years later, but that recanting did not get very wide visibility. But your body maintains pools of essential amino acids in your liver that actually get assembled based on what you need. And your body is continually trying to adapt to what you're eating and when you're eating. And because we are opportunistic creatures, every time you eat, your body drops doing what it's doing and focuses on nutrient digestion and absorption. So I like to use the analogy that if anybody is grandparents and they have grandkids that come over, you never vacuum when the grandkids are there. You don't grocery shop. You don't change sheets. You're basically not doing any of the housekeeping things that happen when the grandkids go away. And if the grandkids were there all the time, your house would probably be a mess. And so that's what happens, with our bodies. It's like when you're constantly grazing or eating, the things that happen when your body takes out dead and decaying bone and cells, our bodies are constantly doing a cleanup. They're taking out the bad and bringing in, recreating the good. Natural killer cells, or taking out cancer and killing viruses and doing all of these things that really are going to put you in optimal health. And as we graze through the day, you're basically turning these functions off or diminishing their ability to operate in that manner. So, when people, it's also sort of the food timing. If I can talk a little bit more, usually if you want to sleep well, then you eat your protein heavy food in the morning, because those are going to take longer to digest, 6 hours for protein. Probably don't want to eat chili, at 7 o'clock at night and then go to bed at 9 or 9:30, because your body is still digesting food. And so you're creating these challenges for your bodies to have to adapt. And you have a circadian rhythm, so your body sort of gets used to doing what you're doing. And our bodies are very good at it. And that's why it takes, sometimes chronic illnesses take decades to develop. They start, unfortunately, they start very young these days with, I think most kids at the age of 10 already start to have plaque smears on their arteries because of the fast food and highly processed food and, high animal consumption. So when you shift diet, as you mentioned, it's going to take at least a week for your metabolism and your body's processes and your digestive enzymes to sort of catch up with what your new plan is. But it does catch up, and that's when you really, usually at the end of the first week, we just see people having almost epiphanies that they're able to sleep for a full night's sleep without getting up in the middle of the night, or waking up in the morning and dreading having to get out of bed. That their energy really changes, and start to see people kind of get that healthy glow on their skin again. And it's really it can be really transformational to people. They don't. It's like the this is probably not a good vegan analogy, but it's when you're heating up a water with a frog in it there in the water. The frog doesn't realize the water's getting hotter and hotter, and that's the standard American diet. Is people are just eating the wrong way, and they're adapting to a really bad environment that will eventually take them out if they don't make a change.
Yeah, I found that to be true for my personal experience, and I didn't realize how poorly I felt. And if I did feel poorly, I would just say, well, this is just what's happening to all my friends. It's just part of getting older. And I saw my parents, they were in worse condition than I was. And I said, well, that's just what happens when you get older. I guess it's starting for me, and I'll wind up like that. And it just didn't occur to me that it could be any different. And I think it's a good point to make, because some people, we talked about earlier how some people think that this might be restrictive. And we dispelled that myth and talked about how there are many things that you can eat, more things than you're eating now if you're have not adopted this lifestyle. But I think that the way that I used to feel, and the symptoms that you were talking about with the people that you've experienced helping, that's restrictive. I think it's restrictive when you have joint pains, or when you don't have good energy, or when you have to make sure you pop this over the counter something before you eat that something, or else you're going to have problems. Or like I went through, worrying every 2-3 hours, if I was out of the house, I had to say, okay, where am I going to get some food here? Because, or if we went out to a restaurant and they gave you one of those beepers, it would be an eternity for me, because sometimes it'd be a half hour or so, and you're like, oh, and I just didn't think that it would be any other way. So you're right. It's good that you talked about that.
So, one thing that was newer to me was how fiber fits into the macronutrients. So fiber is actually part of the complex carbohydrates. And so, when we see people that do some restrictive diets, like if all you're doing is eating fruit, or all you're doing is eating, high protein, those are restrictive diets. But when you're eating a diet that's filled with complex carbohydrates that are whole grains and real beans, not beans that have been made into pasta, or wheat that's had the endosperm and the kernel and the bran taken off, which are the fiber and the nutrients. There's a reason why they do that in the food industry. It's because it's going to last longer. And the reason it lasts longer is bugs don't eat it, because it has no nutritional value, and they're smarter than that. And yet, a lot of the foods, I think, in our diet have become what could be known as survival foods. I heard a talk on this pretty recently, kind of resonated that, a lot of, like, if you had to make it through the winter and you didn't have access to a grocery store, then you would probably be, if you were a farm, you'd probably be canning and freezing and putting things away. Those are survival foods. They're not going to be the same types of food that if you lived in the equator and you had access to food year round, of a variety of food, that you don't think about where the food's going to come from. It just is there. But we're in this mindset of deprivation. So, every time I'm in Northern Virginia, every time there's a rumor of a snowstorm, people are running to the store to buy these things that, are their survival foods. And yet people usually never, miss going to the grocery store once a day if they need to. So it's just a different mindset.
Yeah, it definitely is. Well, we talked about how you are, and we'll talk a little bit maybe later also with your restaurant and how you help people adopt this lifestyle because you serve all this wonderful, healthy food. But we do have a question from Anna, and she was saying, she said, I have type 2 diabetes. Is it okay to eat fruit? What should I eat or avoid?
Yeah, so there's a lot of misconceptions around type 2 diabetes where people become very obsessed with where is it on the glycemic index, is it low or high? So the type 2 diabetes is extremely prevalent in the United States. I think it's greater than 75% of Americans now are pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic. And there's, that's measured by like A1C. If you're over 6.0, then you tend to be type 2 diabetic. And if you're 5.7, then you're pre-diabetic. So if you are eating one way and you continue to eat that way, whether you get metformin or not, that condition is going to continue to worsen. So it's really beneficial to make a lifestyle change. So taking things out, particularly saturated fats, are going to be and oils are going to be extremely beneficial for people with type 2 diabetes. Consuming fruit with a meal is what we recommend when we have diabetics on our program. So if you're eating, for breakfast, might have like a bowl of oats that you may add chia seeds, flaxseed meal, hemp seed meal. I like to put cocoa nibs in there. I usually dice ginger. Sometimes I grate vegetables and mix them in. I put, multiple types of berries on there if you like bananas. So that way you're getting like a whole grain, you're getting some veggies and some berry nutrients. But fruit is great. It's one of the essential. You're getting all your micronutrients from fruit. So fruit is part of a healthy diet. So while you're looking to cut back animal products, or take out animal products and minimize oil, that's when you really start to watch. And we've shown that you can reverse type 2 diabetes in 30 days or less. And that's where your doctor's having to continually adjust your medication, if you're on medication, until you're off of that. And that's when you're hopefully making a lifestyle change and continuing it. And get support from your doctor. There's Dr. Neil Barnard, Barnard, has a great book. It's called Reversing Diabetes. Dr. Neal, not Dr. Neil Barnard. And so we actually use that book as part of the program that we do. It's got recipes in there, and it basically talks about, removing animal products. So it's called a low-fat vegan diet is what they call it. But it's, essentially a whole food diet without oil.
So don't fear the fruit.
No, embrace fruit. Fruit is great.
Embrace it.
Now, not snacking on fruit, because if you eat fruit independent of a meal, then your blood sugar will go up, and that can impact diabetics. So make sure you eat your fruit with a meal.
Well, that's excellent. And I think about people who may be having their blood test results showing that they're pre-diabetic. When you think of it as like your pre-cancer. I mean, if you hear pre, it's to me, I would try to take action as if it was the diagnosis, because as you said, if you continue eating this way, it's just going to become that. So you may as well take care of it now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. View it as a blessing that you got that warning sign. And, unless you want to visit your doctor a year down the road and be prescribed with a medication. And certainly, unfortunately, that's what happens. On our YouTube channel, we did a diabetes video. So if you go on GreenFare YouTube channel, we did 25 people with type 2 diabetes. We did interviews with them before and after the program. And, we just watched people. Some had never considered a plant-based diet before. And at the end, there was one fellow on there that he had come in not only with type 2 diabetes, but hypertension, high cholesterol. He could no longer take high blood pressure medication because he was starting to have kidney failure. And that's something that every medication is going to have some side effect. It's just a matter of time before, it starts to emanate. And so he went through this 28-day diabetes program that we had. And at the end of the program, he went back to his 3 doctors and they said that he was a new man. They said, "You're a new man." And
Wow.
now, instead of being faced with sitting in a dialysis center every day, he's planning a trip to Belize with his brother. So that's the kind of outcome, that makes us very pleased.
Oh, well, that is wonderful, and I'm glad that we're kind of talking about medications because anybody that is considering this, especially if you have hypertension, high blood pressure, or if you have diabetes, if you're on these prescription medications, if you do this, I mean, you could become over medicated rather quickly, wouldn't you say, Gwyn?
Yeah, I have another analogy that I like to use, and that is if somebody has a car and their engine light goes out, and you took it to the mechanic and he gave you a piece of black tape to put over your light. That's what the doctors are doing with medications these days. They're not fixing the underlying root cause, they're just removing our ability to see the symptoms. And I my background is engineering, and so I tend to look at things from like a root cause perspective. It's like fix what's causing the problem, not try to remove the indicators of the problem. So, it's very important, I think, to find somebody that has background in nutrition. Most doctors, I think, are very limited in their exposure to the power of food, or the harm that can be caused by eating the wrong foods. And so I think there's still a lot of, like in the, a lot of the medical journals these days, they'll still talk about type 2 diabetes can only be cured by bariatric surgery. And it's like, oh my gosh, they're going to change the inner configuration of your digestive tract and limit the amount of food, that instead of having somebody, and it's a temporary thing, it's a horrific surgery, and it can cause huge weight loss, but it's not something it's a good long-term solution. People usually end up going back to the way they came if they didn't, if they don't make the changes that are needed in the first place.
Right.
So yeah.
Very good. So if you were on these medications, you would probably want to talk to your doctor and keep track, maybe keep a log of your blood pressure or your glucose levels, just so that the doctor could be aware, because maybe the doctor might have to titrate you down off the medication, because that's how effective this is, guys. I really hope you're getting inspired. Let's see. We have a question from Jacob, and he wants to know. He said, "I like to eat eggs for breakfast. Is there something like eggs that I can eat? Because you did talk about the oatmeal, which is
Yeah,
really delicious. But
yeah, yeah.
what about if you're doing that?"
Yeah, I can sort of share. My breakfast almost every day is going to be some type of grain, whether it's brown rice or quinoa or spelt, or some type of whole oats, rolled oats or steel cut oats. And then I mix those with every kind of different thing, and the fruits vary. And I mean, let's see, this morning I think I had like finely grated carrots in there. So it really, for me, that provides a lot of variety. If there's something that you like like eggs, we actually teach a technique called dry saute in our first class. You can Google that on YouTube and learn how to do it without oil. And we do a tofu scramble is the very first recipe. So if you get super firm tofu, and you basically crumble that up like eggs, you start out with onions and you add spinach and onions and tomatoes and turmeric and super hard tofu. And you're basically doing like a dry saute of this. And at the end, the turmeric adds sort of the yellowish color that you're looking for with eggs. And it's really the onions and the vegetables that you're tasting. Tofu really takes on the flavor of, as Amy was talking earlier, the spices and herbs that you put it in. But it's more a similar texture as what you might be accustomed to with that.
Yeah, there's so many kitchen adventures that you can have if you just give it a try. Well, I have another true or false question because we're talking about food and you have your GreenFare Organic Cafe restaurant. And we were talking about this, you and I, a little bit earlier before the broadcast. And the question is true or false? Most restaurants do not serve organic food. Okay, guys, type that in. And Gwyn, what do you say?
That would be true. There's very, very few restaurants in the country that are really going to focus on organic. It's sort of interesting. Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic restaurant or grocery store in the country. So they actually have trucks that deliver organic produce and trucks that deliver conventionally grown food. And the reason that if you go in I don't know, I think you're down, I don't know where your market is, but if you go to like a Safeway or Giant, sort of the mid-tier grocery stores, and you buy organic potatoes, do you ever wonder why they're shrink wrapped in plastic? It's to avoid cross-contamination. So, produce and they talk about the dirty dozen. It's like what's on the outside. So you can try washing it off, but when synthetic fertilizers that are petroleum based are used, they're on the inside of your food. So, for example, if you know any potato growers, which I do, they have one crop that they'll sell to the markets that are going to be perfect. There's no wormholes. They're, the same size and shape. And then there's one crop that they grow for their family that is minus the some like 400 chemicals that are used to keep the pests and keep worms off. It's like if the insects and the worms don't want your food, then you probably don't want your food either.
Wow. That's something that a lot of people do talk about because they're concerned about organic and they're worrying is it is really important. So, I mean, let's talk a little bit about we have the contaminants and the pesticides, but what else makes organic a better choice if you can do that?
Yeah, so the one thing maybe to talk about initially is just about the cost difference. If Consumer Reports did an article about organic and they tested foods, and if it was conventionally grown foods, that there were 3 carcinogenic products that they were strongly promoting policymakers to eliminate from the EPA to eliminate from our food supply. Those are in the United States. They're acceptable for use in the United States, not in Europe. And that's why so many people can go to Europe and eat the food there and feel fine, and then they come back to the U.S. and it's like, that creates. I must be gluten intolerant because of what was sprayed on the food creates, these problems in their gut. So
Yeah, Europe has the precautionary principle.
Absolutely, yeah. Instead of generally regarded as safe, which we kind of. The other thing I think that you mentioned is if you're buying organic, then you're certainly not getting genetically modified organisms, which are, when they combine the bacteria from a bug and a piece and corn, and so it's like these bioengineered products that if you look at some of the science and they look at third generational studies, they actually promote kids with allergies, low birth weight, and propensity for cancer. So the small investment that you're making, and I think the price differential has definitely declined over the past, especially a couple of years, where if it was you're buying a pint of blueberries and it was like $2 more, you may put it back. But when it becomes a nickel difference, then people are just going to, flip. So we're sort of in that curve right now where as the volume goes up, the price differential comes down. And I was at a meeting of the Organic Trade Association, and it's like that's where things are going right now. You can look at Walmart as the number one provider of organics, or you can go to the Costco's have almost every type of produce grown organically at some of these stores.
Yeah, so the nutrients are profile is really different. I know that talked to some people that I interviewed who were gardeners, and they talked about how plants defend themselves. They defend themselves against diseases and also against insects. And if they have to do it on their own, they come up with these different chemicals that they produce.
More antioxidants, right? That's
Right.
what creates the higher antioxidants in plants that have had to create those defenses. It's the same way for us. And when you've overcome a virus, you are protected with your own immunity because you've mounted defense, and those are the things that benefit us through antioxidants. When we consume those those plants.
Yep, absolutely. So Richard wanted to know, if I eliminate sugar, oil, and salt, how can I make the food taste good? Well, you would know that answer because that's the only kind of food that you serve at GreenFare Organic.
Yeah, so usually, again, that's a transition that people go through. And I think it's almost like if you feel poorly all the time, you don't realize how poorly you feel. So if you're eating salt, oil, and sugar all the time, that's the taste that you know. You know the mouthfeel and the chemical reaction of the sugar high, the mouthfeel of fat, and probably the high sodium high sodium. If I go to a Asian restaurant, my fingers are like sausages the next day because of the high sodium. So when you take those things out and you're eating freshly prepared food with spices and herbs, you can go heavy on the spices and herbs for a while, but you taste the things that you're eating and not the salt and not the oil and not the sugar that's been added to the food. So, for example, with our muffins, we make those with whole dates that are soaked over in water to sort of reconstitute. And so those will make the muffins sweet, but not crazy sweet. Fruit is great for sweet. If you want sweet, it's like fruit is the best thing that you can eat after a meal. Salt and oil are just it takes some time, and you usually see the benefit of that within a week of taking those things out. Learn to retaste your food without those things.
Yeah, I think that sometimes you just have to learn how to back off of it, and eventually when you do, you'll realize that when you do encounter something like you said with salt, you get swelling, or it just doesn't even taste good because it's
Too
just
much.
overpowering, which is pretty amazing. Although a lot of people think that adding salt to their food or having extra salt in their food, they think, oh well, I don't do that. I don't take a salt shaker and put salt on my food. But there's salt in a lot of foods that people are eating that they're not aware of.
It's something like 95% of the sodium comes from restaurant food and processed food, and maybe 5% is what you would add at the table. So if somebody has high blood pressure, they get diagnosed with high blood pressure, they go to their doctor, and their doctor says, you need to cut back on the sodium, and they stop using the salt shaker. It's probably not going to affect them enough to get off the medication. But when you start label reading, and there's a rule we use with it's Jeff. I don't know if you know Jeff back down in Florida, the registered dietitian, and he says, his rule is if it's a processed food, you want the calories to equal the milligrams of sodium. So, for example, if it's for most healthy Americans, 1,500 milligrams of sodium is what you want to limit it to in a day. And if you get tomato sauce, soups, bread, believe it or not, bread is going to have more sodium than potato chips, but it's on the outside, so you're going to taste it. But it's sort of deceiving because in these other foods, it's actually cooked, embedded in the food. So it's going to, raise blood pressure without you really tasting it and recognizing that that's happening.
Yeah, those food manufacturers are pretty sneaky. They get a lot of these things in the food, and in sodas, they have sodium. There's just so many different vehicles that they use, and like you said, you don't. You'll taste a potato chip, and you'll say this is salty, and you taste a slice of bread that has more salt in it, and you wouldn't even know that it had. So yeah, that's a good thing to learn about. So if somebody wanted to make an action plan, what would be a good action plan? What should they do if they wanted to start? Should they just kind of dip their toe in the pool and just kind of try it out a little bit? What would your recommendations, because you do help people do this. So
Yeah, I mean, there's really two paths. For me, it was over decades. I think I stopped eating red meat when I was in my young teens and then poultry in my 20s. And it was more from an animal perspective. And 10 years ago, I was pescatarian and clinging to the fish products because I had this belief of protein. But the first thing I would do, I'd watch the film Forks Over Knives. It's like eat with a fork and avoid a scalpel. And I'd watch The Game Changers. And those are two very inspirational films that have some pretty good ideas in them about what meals would look like without the animal products. I mean, if you just envision Thanksgiving, usually taking the turkey out doesn't affect the meal that much when you have mashed potatoes and green beans and sweet potatoes and stuffing and gosh, I think of all the things that we usually have, like a walnut lentil loaf or something like that. That's kind of like the main dish. But the animal products really, if you take that out and you increase everything else, and you try to get the beans and greens are important, from an iron standpoint. Sometimes we'll see people very very limited, and try to get a variety of plants from those four food categories, beans and grains, and then veggies, and then fruit for dessert. And you don't have to worry about obsessing about getting every one of those at every meal. It's over a couple of days. Your body's going to assemble those Lego blocks in the way that it needs, and you'll be fine.
I like that Thanksgiving analogy, because we do have wonderful feasts at Thanksgiving. It doesn't include a turkey now, but back when it did, if I would have thought about just saying, okay, I'm going to take just a small serving of everything that's on this table that is not an animal, that's not a turkey or what have you, and put that all on my plate, I don't know where I would fit the turkey in, because it would just be so full. So that's a great analogy. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit more about GreenFare Cafe.
So we opened in 2019, and we've been delivering this. We actually do a 28-day program now, 28-day Kickstart that we do every month, and we also have a meal plan. So people that live locally will stop in and pick up 7 meals twice a week. So we're helping people with the variety. If you live by yourself, then it becomes a lot to try and cook every single meal with different types of plants. So we make it easy for people just to stop in and get something that would be equivalent or better to what they might come up, cook at home, from high quality ingredients with organic based ingredients and without added salt, oil, and sugar. And the restaurant is we're known for our spinach and sweet potato lasagna. It's actually, I think, the Esselstyn. It's the Rip Esselstyn lasagna from, gosh, which one of his cookbooks. We always take recipes. The Forks Over Knives. There's an app, Forks Over Knives app. If you get that app on the phone, that's the cookbook, my cookbook of choice. It's quick ingredients. You can build a shopping list online. You can center it around one specific ingredient. And so even when I travel, I'll pull it up on my phone and I can cook a delicious meal in a single pot with minimal effort. So that's pretty awesome.
And I also wanted to let everyone know that if you wanted 5 free recipes from me, you could go to begreenwithamy.com/join, and I'll send you 5 free recipes and some fun pictures too. But I'm sure that you have so many recipes, and so your restaurant is not just a great source for people who want to be plant-based and get food that is without sugar, oil, or salt, but is definitely tasty. But you are also helping people to heal, which is so wonderful. And we put up your Facebook and GreenFare.com. Now, you had told me that you were going to be doing a veg fest.
We started a Fairfax Veg Fest. If you go to fairfaxvegfest.org, it's actually on under events on GreenFare Cafe. We did it in 2019, and we had something like 5,000 people come, primarily because of our speaker list. But it's a very well-run event. I've got a committee of 12 people that have been planning this for 6 months. T. Colin Campbell, Dr. Neil Barnard, Dr. Baxter Montgomery, the cardiologist from Houston, Dr. Jim Loomis, and James Wilkes from the Game Changers will be there. Gene Bauer from Farm Sanctuary, Cortland Malloy from the Washington Post. He's written maybe half a dozen articles about GreenFare, and Darryl Green, the football player, NFL football player. Him and Tom Brady are the two longest playing members of the NFL, and they're both, plant-based. So Daryl's gone through our program twice. He's a frequent patron of the restaurant. But Fairfax Veg Fest, we have all-day bands. We've got something like 80 vendors there, and adoptable dogs, and a farm sanctuary will be there. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of fun. I might want to make a trip. Well, I really wanted to thank you so much is there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we signed off?
I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show, and I love what you're doing, and appreciate being able to have a talk with you today.
Thank you so much. It was such a joy to have you on, and you do so many wonderful things for plant-based movement and helping people around you and all over who can find you on the internet, and it's just so wonderful. And all of you that are watching or listening, if you could just tell us what you're going to remember about this broadcast, what's your takeaway, and are you plant-based, and if you're not, did you think about doing it because of what we talked about today? And I really wanted to hope that this is going to make you want to today take this opportunity to go in and try this and make a good change for your life. I also wanted to thank Just Task Voice. She helped us with the countdown and the promos. And Just Task Voice, who's coming up next?
Fast food, sweets, or junk food calling your name? Salty, crunchy snacks derailing your success? Learn why and strategies to overcome food addiction with Esther Loveridge, who at age 72 lost 155 pounds. Join us on Wednesday, March 9th, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, on Be Green with Amy Live.
Well, I hope all of you enjoyed that. I hope that you can join me and Gwyn, because I'm going to have her join me with my tagline, and you guys can type it in, and that's the Be Strong, Be Well, and Be Green. Are you ready, Gwyn?
Of course.
All right. Well, until I see you guys next time, remember, be strong, be well, and be
Green.
green. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Amy.
Now you can listen to Be Green with Amy expert interviews wherever you go. Listen while walking, meal prepping, or traveling. Find Be Green with Amy on Apple, Google, Alexa, Amazon, or virtually anywhere you find podcasts. Be strong, be well, and be green with Be Green with Amy.